This refers specifically for the Iver Johnson Safety Automatic Hammer, or sometimes I've seen it Safety Hammer Automatic. Now they made these guns in 3 models, or as we say nowadays, generations. This one is a 3rd model, and the best way to tell if you have a 1st or 2nd model versus a 3rd model is to count the number of pins on the left side of the gun. 4 pins means you have a 3rd model. 2 pins mean you have a 1st or a 2nd model. All 3 models came in 2 frame sizes: small in 22 rimfire or 32 Smith & Wesson, and large frame in 38 Smith & Wesson.
That looked like there's a firing pin.
Well, there's part of a firing pin in there. And it doesn't feel very springy either. Alright, we're going to punch this pin out. Didn't have a punch small enough, so I had to use this heavy-duty needle. Part of the way out. Keep going. Trying to be careful because this should be spring-loaded. But it's not. There's the pin. And you'd think you'd just be able to push it out. But I'm going to have to end up driving it out. And it comes out with very little effort. And drops down into the action. Oop, there it is. And there's our firing pin with a sheared off nose. Alright, let's throw our parts into a bag and order us a new firing pin. And about a week later, we get a new firing pin. But sharp-eyed viewers might say, hey, that doesn't look quite right. And you'd be right. The back end looks different. It actually does drop in and sort of functions if you cock and aim and point down. It even protrudes the correct amount. So it must be related somehow. But there's no way to drive the pin in to retain it. So I made this nice drawing, sent the old one back, and about 2 weeks later I get this one. Now this one looks correct. It even has a complete nose. Seeing how the old pin had to be driven out, I'm thinking maybe it was staked in. The new firing pin does not drop freely into the hole. If it did, I wouldn't need to take off any more parts, but I'm thinking this hole needs some attention, so I need a straight shot at it. I was hoping the hammer would drop out when I remove the bolt, but it looks like we're going to have to remove some more parts. Alright, let's take out the mainspring. Drive that plate off from left to right. Almost there. And that's what it looks like when you drive it out. Let's see. Like I'm going to take off some more parts. So we're going to try that pin right there. And drive it out with this punch. And there's that pin. Now the punch is holding what the pin was holding. So you pull the punch out. And hopefully you can wiggle it out. Now manipulating the trigger helps. And there it comes. I didn't get it on video, but the little sear button comes out too. Now we have access to the hole. So we're going to take a drill bit by hand, running it backwards. We're going to just kind of make sure that hole is round. Once we do that, we'll test fit our firing pin. It still doesn't quite fit. While messing with it, I noticed there was something in the bottom. I pried it out, and it turns out it's our old mangled firing pin that we thought was missing. Now, based on some measuring and some guessing, I'd already ordered some new springs. I wish I found that earlier. I could have measured the wire size of the old one and got a stronger spring. But I think this might work. If not, I'll get another one. So I cut it down to size and tried to ream out that hole again, but it wasn't quite working. While editing this video, I came up with a theory. What if sometime, maybe in the 19-teens, the leg of the firing pin spring worked its way into the firing pin channel and wedged the pin forward, causing the gun to lock up? The original owner, I'll name him Orville, forced the cylinder, causing the pin to snap off. Orville threw the gun in the drawer, never to be fired again. So maybe that firing pin wasn't staked, but it was too large, so I chucked it into the drill press, hit it with a file for just a few seconds to bring it back down to its factory size. And voila! it drops right in. And I tested to make sure it freely moves, and it does. You know you're not a proper amateur gunsmith unless you use a Dremel at least a little bit. So I polished it up, and we'll drop the spring in first, then the firing pin. We'll drive a pin into that hole right there, and that pin retains the firing pin of that little slot at the bottom. It moves back and forth over that slot. So put the pin in the hole, actually from left to right, while retaining the firing pin with your finger, and then just drive the pin in. Test it for function. Seems to be moving freely. All right, let's put it all back together. All right, so the hammer is held in by this bolt in this hole, and the sear button is held in by a pin right there. And the way this works is the trigger pushes this button and drops the hammer. All right, so I slipped in the sear button through the back, through the slot in the trigger guard, and it pops out right behind the trigger. And you just got to wiggle it around until you can line the hole in the sear button with the hole in the frame. I ended up using my punch to drive through the hole in the sear button in the frame. See, that's the punch, not the pin. And then I also put the bolt in as far as I could. So everything should be close. So then you take the retaining pin and drive it in, and that pushes the punch out, and hopefully everything stays aligned. And voila. For the hammer bolt, just install it as far as you can and wiggle the hammer around until all the holes align. You hear that click, then you can just screw it in so it'll engage the threading on the opposite side. And we got our trigger and our hammer mounted. Of course, we still need to put our main spring in. All right, this was the tricky part. So you basically have to compress this spring just a little bit to get it to align with the grooves in the frame. And once you get it aligned, then you have to press down to get it started in the grooves. I struggled, but I got it on that way. But then I figured out an even easier way. Get you a socket and press on the back of it, and the socket allows you to both guide it and press at the same time with one hand. And then once you do that, you just drive it in square so it's flush on both sides. All right, I got the gun all back together, so let's just test it, see if it all functions correctly. The firing pin on a rimfire gun operates different than a centerfire. On a rimfire, the firing pin crushes the priming compound located inside the rim against the face of the cylinder. This means you should not dry fire your rimfire guns because it will damage the back of the chamber. So to check for function, I found some spent shells to cushion the blow. And as you can see, it knocks the ever-living snot out of it. I dry fired it a couple dozen times. It seems to hit the rim a little harder than it needs to, and I'm worried about it piercing. Couldn't get a good picture to illustrate it, but it seems like the firing pin is just a little bit proud of the frame. So I'm going to get my little grinding tool on my Dremel and shave the front of that firing pin off. And usually 22 firing pins are a little rectangular looking, so I'm going to kiss both sides of the firing pin with the same Dremel. Alright, first shots. I'm going to try some 22 shorts first, just in case. Put just 3 in there. If I was any good at editing, I'd probably have that gun in frame right now, but just look at that beautiful sky. But I won't waste your time. It shot those 3 shorts just fine and left nice indentions on where the firing pin hit it. Next, I'm going to load it with 7 rounds of standard velocity 22 long rifle. I even have it partially in frame this time. Now if you look at my fingers, I got it out in front of the trigger guard. Normally that's not a problem. On this gun being so short, the cylinder's so short, the blast from that cylinder gap reminds you to move your finger. The correct period way to shoot this would be with one hand. I'm trying to see where it prints. You can try this last one double action. Those firing pin indentions look pretty good. Ended up shooting about 30 or 40 rounds and it was 100% reliable, so I'm pretty happy with that. Also, if you live in an area that doesn't have any gnats, go ahead and give the Lord a thank you. After plinking on steel a while, I decided to put it on paper because it looked like it was definitely shooting a little low. As you can see, at about 10 yards, it's definitely shooting low. The proper way to fix that would be to file down the front sight, but this gun is well over 100 years old, so I think I'm just going to have to remember to aim a little high. Oh, look, I'm getting better, fully in frame. I'll admit this is not the easiest gun in the world to shoot. Being so small, and the sights are off, and it's heavily sprung. But if you want an antique 22 caliber revolver that still shoots modern ammo, this was definitely my choice. Oh yeah, one other minor issue I had occasionally, sometimes when you were ejecting the spent brass, one of them would get caught underneath the extractor star. And so you kind of had to pry it out or poke it out. Not a big deal, but it was annoying. Thanks for watching.